The engine mounts have been installed. Here is the passenger side mount right here, and it's two pieces. It's got this upper plate and the dummy pulley to replace the power steering pump that I removed that normally sits here in the valley, and then here's the lower part of the mount, and you can see that I've tied the mount into existing engine block holes that weren't being used. This bolt actually attaches the two plates together. There's another bolt that's behind the pulley that you can't see. Here's a look down into the valley. You can see that I used this hole. This was a bolt that held the power steering pump in place. Now here's a nice tip for you. Go ahead and put a hook, an engine lifting hook, on the back side of this plate, and that'll make your job a lot easier for lifting the engine. Another thing that I didn't mention earlier was the alternator mount. This is a Chrysler alternator, and the reason I used a Chrysler and not a GM or a Ford is because I actually bought a long time ago a GM alternator, a Ford alternator, and the Chrysler alternator, and tried to fit all three into this space. The goal was to try to get the alternator mounted closer into the block than the stock GM alternator for the North Star. And the Chrysler alternator was the one that I could fit the tightest in there. And that's an issue because the this is the the firewall of the car will be right here, and I mean there is very little room between the firewall and the alternator where I've got it now. The stock GM alternator sticks out a lot further. It sticks out way out here like this, and right now I've got a 1/4 inch of space between the MR2 firewall and this alternator. And you can see I made a mount, this kind of L-shaped bracket that ties the mounting for the AC compressor and the alternator together, and then I made this upper mount. Now, because it's so close in, I am going to have to put a heat shield between the exhaust manifold, or the exhaust header, or whatever you want to call this. It's a stamped steel header, really welded steel header, and the alternator. So I'm going to build a heat shield, and the nice thing about this bracket is I'll be able to attach the heat shield to the bracket, and then there's two unused bolt holes here that I can attach the heat shield to. I'll just make a heat shield to cover the whole manifold. That'll protect the firewall of the car from the heat of this manifold, because this is really the front side of the engine. Here's the MR2 turbo engine mount, and then my mount that joins to it. Now, something that is not obvious from what we're looking at now, but I've actually moved this mount over relative to the MR2 turbo. On the MR2 turbo, this mount is actually located about here, okay, on the firewall. I moved it over to here. I'm sharing only one bolt hole with the stock MR2 body, okay, and I created a new nut plate and attached it to the car in this new location, reinforced the firewall of the car so that it could take the load of the new location of the engine mount, because the metal is pretty thin in that location, so it's important to put a doubler in there to reinforce the body of the car. Because remember, this mount is trying to lift the front of the car into the air under hard acceleration.